Hello, my name is Noah Payinga, and this is my project on Albania's disaster management. I figured I'd include a little bit of background information on Albania in this PowerPoint because it's not a huge country, so I wouldn't be surprised if some of you maybe haven't heard of it. Albania is a small Eastern European country. It was a communist country up until its transition to a democracy in the 1990s. Albania is prone to floods, earthquakes, landslides, and extreme weather, and its current population is around 2.8 million people. The history and rationale behind Albania's disaster management. Albania has only recently started implementing legislation regarding disaster management. Its government passed a civil protection law regarding disaster management in 2019. And although the government successfully passed this legislation regarding disaster management, they did not have ample time to implement it before the fatal earthquake of 2019 that happened in Albania. Like many other developing countries, Albania does lack proper development in many governmental sectors, and issues that are not urgent or not politicized enough often receive less attention from the Albanian government. And it is because of this that Albania lacks a history behind disaster management. Albania has a bottom-up implementation pattern with regards to disaster management. Depending on the circumstances, recovery actions are triggered by the local government. However, the influence of the national government is often right behind that of the local one. According to the Albanian government, in order to support disaster risk management, municipalities are required to set aside funds that equal to 4% of their whole municipal budget. Bottom-up implementation is not always the case in Albania. Depending on the disaster, the national government may have the initial involvement over the local ones. And this also happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. But I think this is the case with a lot of governments, not just the one in Albania, as they utilized a top-down approach to manage the situation because there was a lack of information when the pandemic first struck. With respect to disaster hazards and planning, Albania is primarily prone to disasters such as earthquakes and flooding. Due to its tectonic situation, Albania has experienced many disastrous earthquakes, and flooding is also common in the country and is usually caused due to intense rainfall and poor land use. In an article published by the World Bank, the author states that it has been said that if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. This is especially true for managing disaster and climate risks in any country, but it is perhaps even more relevant in a country like Albania, which is exposed to floods, extreme weather, earthquakes, wildfires, and landslides. Due to the unfortunate disasters that have repeatedly happened throughout the country, Albania is now better equipped for disaster hazards and disaster planning. The country was able to learn from past disasters, especially the latest devastating earthquake, the one previously mentioned in 2019, and put forth better disaster planning measures and ultimately help them during forthcoming disasters such as that of COVID-19. I have included a few pictures in this slide from the 2019 earthquake, as this was the very disastrous earthquake that hit Albania and ultimately shaped its disaster management and policies and disaster management implementation around it. Participants in Albania's disaster management. The government agencies within the Albanian government that contribute and oversee disaster management are the Prime Minister's Office, the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Health and Social Protection, and the Ministry of Interior. There are also many other participants that contribute to Albania's disaster management operations aside from its own government. During the 2019 earthquake, Albania reached out to international participants for assistance. One of the main contributors during the 2019 earthquake was the Albanian Red Cross, and there's also been hundreds of emergency professionals from 8 non-EU countries and rescue workers from 12 EU countries that have aided the Albanians during the disastrous earthquake. Albania also received an EU civil protection team. For the humanitarian phase, the UN dispatched a UNDAC team in Albania, and they collaborated with the EUCP team, as well as with the government of Albania to undertake a building damage assessment. Being that Albania is also a NATO member, NATO was also a major participant in Albania's disaster management as well. There are a few obstacles to Albania's disaster management. Albania faces many obstacles in establishing effective disaster management. Firstly, the issue of corruption has been present in the country since its change in regime in the 1990s. Though the issue of corruption is slowly fading away, Albania's economy is not stellar to support effective disaster management to its full potential. Secondly, another obstacle that prevents effective disaster management in Albania is the confusion between the national government and the local ones. And this confusion is caused due to the responsibility of the local governments to directly handle disaster management in their affected areas, while also the national government holds the power to do so. So this creates a confusion between the local and the national government when it comes to assigning tasks for disaster management. Another obstacle to disaster management in Albania is the lack of disaster management specialists. The lack of specialists in the areas affected by the 2019 earthquake allowed for trained and specialized individuals for surrounding countries to aid Albanians in disaster management. How disasters have shaped disaster management in Albania. Since the devastating earthquake, the Albanian government has funded many disaster management projects and implemented laws focusing on disaster management. After the 2019 earthquake, the Albanian government was able to rebuild the homes, hospitals, and schools that were affected by the earthquake. The government worked with many specialized individuals to ensure that the buildings would be stronger and withstanding any further disasters. The government held many builders responsible for the poor building conditions that led to the catastrophes of the earthquake. And since then, the Albanian government has been working to implement rules and regulations when building in order to ensure that such catastrophes are minimized in the future. As a result of the earthquake, Albania's disaster preparedness and readiness plans were also updated and revised. Numerous of these projects, led by the Ministry of Health and Social Protection and WCO, made it easier to build reliable coordination mechanisms, which eventually had a positive effect on the COVID-19 reaction and mitigation. Below are the references that I've used if you are interested in checking any of them out to read a little bit more about the 2019 earthquake or any of Albania's disaster management programs. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.